in today's world. If you really want to become a dominant player and you really want to maintain your hegemony over your market, you need to become an ecosystem. So I always tell people, don't think of products. Once you build your product, think of platforms. Build platforms, not products. Now, what's the difference? A product does one thing really well for a customer. But what a platform does is suddenly open up your product to not just you providing value to your customer, but creating a way where multiple parties, by participating, can create even more value.
Hi, and welcome to the It's a Good Start podcast with your hosts Mike Lander and Kevin Givens. The aim of our show is to help scale-up entrepreneurs master the best of what other people have already figured out so that you can unlock your own potential. We started it because we've both been entrepreneurs for over 25 years and wanted to share our knowledge and our guest knowledge. We're all about actionable insights. We want to take away one or two things per episode that can help you move the ball forward in your business. We really hope you enjoy and keep coming back for more. Steve, welcome to It's a Good Start podcast, and thank you ever so much for joining us. Or should I say Captain Hoff?
You can say Captain Hoff. That's my nickname. It's great to be here, Mike and Kevin. I look forward to the show.
Steve, do you want to just explain to our listeners basically who you are and why Make Elephants Fly was a book you wrote?
So Make Elephants Fly. The elephant is your dream, your big idea. You want your company to grow into an elephant. But how do you make this dream happen? How do you get it off the ground? That's the question. So Make Elephants Fly is all about radical innovation. I run Founder Space. It's a global startup incubator and accelerator. I work hundreds of startups all around the world, and I watch the process that they go through as they innovate, as they grow, as they scale their businesses. And the book contains the process by which startups innovate, which they radically transform their business to actually get that hyper growth that you need if you're going to become the next unicorn, or even if you're just going to become a $100 million company from a $1 million company.
Brilliant. What a great introduction. So a question off the blocks from me. There must be a couple of things that you see, 2 or 3 big themes. What are they across all of the hundreds of startups that you talk to?
So the startups I see that have rapid revenue growth have a few things in common. And these are essential if you're going to grow your company. So number one, when I look at startups, they don't sell a product once to customers. This is something that almost none of the startups I work with do. Because if you sell a product once to a customer and then they go away and you never see them again, all of a sudden, you have to acquire a new customer. And as we all know, customer acquisition is one of your biggest costs.
Yeah.
And then, so continually having to acquire new customers is really expensive. If the ticket price for what you're selling is big, like it's a car, well, you can afford to sell once because there's a lot of profit margin in there to acquire more customers. But most of us, we aren't selling huge ticket item things worth, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars or more. What we're selling are smaller ticket item things. And in this case, what you want to do is get every customer you acquire locked into your business, locked into a recurring revenue cycle. And if you look at the vast majority of companies out there that are growing rapidly, they have this model. They are getting recurring revenue. Amazon, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, Apple. It just goes on and on. Name the company, recurring revenue is a fundamental part of their business model. So that is number one.
That makes sense. And I guess in terms of that journey, there must be some trial and error and failures in terms of, certainly for myself running an agency as a service-based business, I think there's a level of maturity where you do have to productize, but you probably start off by tailoring absolutely everything you do to actually, okay, our best results, our best clients ask for X, Y, and Z. And this is what we do most of the time for most of our clients. Let's turn those into a product. And then that's where it becomes repeatable. So I guess it's in the early days, listen to your customers, figure out what works, fail a few times. But then once you've nailed it, how do you productize it and resell it and package that to a wider audience?
That is the challenge. So I'm
Yeah.
working with companies all the time, and a lot of them have a lot of revenue. Like I'm working with this company now that does services for banks, like big banks, they're a service provider. They're raking in a lot of money, but they're still a service provider. Like they get
Mm,
paid and then they move on to the next bank. So
yeah.
they know if they are going to scale their business beyond, scaling their team, which, the problem in the service business is it's hard to scale your team. Like hard to find the talent. People, especially if you require a team with a high degree of talent, then you're going to be limited by getting those people and retaining those people. If you productize it, all of a sudden you can scale without that limitation. You know, especially software products, very easy to scale. So they're looking how they can take what they've building custom for banks and actually build it as a product. But
And
that
when you say
transit
productize, Steve, so again, lots of discussion about people wanting to productize their service. I don't think they mean turning it into a product really. I think they mean standardization. What's the kind of difference between productization and standardization in
okay,
your view?
there's a big difference. So if you're a service provider and you want to remain a service provider, you can get efficiencies out of standardizing.
Yeah,
So that means that literally every client who comes in the door, they're getting roughly the same thing. It means you can move much faster. You can put a process in place, really important things for growing your business. However, it doesn't fundamentally change the nature of your business. You are still limited by the talent you can acquire and retain in your company, which is a slower growth path. A
yeah,
product is something that people can use independent of how many people you have on staff. So there's software companies out there with 50 people that have millions of users.
Mhm.
These aren't, with 50 people, you cannot service millions of users. It just isn't going to happen.
yeah.
So that is the fundamental difference. Me in the technology space, I'm telling people there are different ways to scale. There are different types of businesses. If you want to grow from 1 million to 10 million, maybe to 100 million, you can do that if you're really smart under standardization, like standardizing your process, building your brand, becoming a dominant player, and also picking a niche, like an area where you
Exactly.
far outshine all your competitors. Because the other problem is you're competing with everybody else, and you're usually competing on price and things like that, which means it's hard to grow.
Yep.
Because if you're competing on price, it's hard to hire more people. You get caught in this endless loop. So the other way is you standardize, but you also standardize in an area where you can be the go-to place. Like nobody is better than you. You have expertise that focuses on this area that other people just aren't focusing on, and they don't do well. Those in-house expertise and things like that give you a competitive edge. If you want to go beyond that, if you want to get into one of these companies that the growth potential is pretty much unlimited, then you have to develop a product around your service. And that is a whole nother ball game. There's a
Yeah.
whole nother way you have to innovate to get to that level.
And so by product, you mean basically some kind of technology, SaaS based platform whereby I subscribe, I get something out of the back end of it in exchange for a monthly fee that I provide. And it's automated and I log in and it's human touch free.
Absolutely. So automating is the key. Automating is what has driven the technology boom, right? We're automating every process in our workforce, everything we do in our daily lives. We are automating it with computers. So you have to look at the processes you go through and say, can I take a piece of this process or the whole thing? And can we automate it in a way that we can put it out there and we can get, we aren't limited by 100 clients at once. We can have thousands, we can have millions of clients using this. That's a scalable business. Now, it's not enough just to do that. You have to do that in a space where other people haven't done it already, because
Yep.
a lot of all the low hanging fruit has been taken. I mean, people we're automating everything that can be automated and putting it online as SaaS products. It's a great business model, but it's getting crowded. So
It is.
you have to look for a very unique area, and that area can't be too small. Because again, you can be niche if you're a service provider, because if you're niche and you charge a good amount, there's a good
Yeah.
profit margin, you can do that. But if you're going to scale it to millions of people and dramatically lower the price so you can outcompete other people, then you're going to need something that is unique. And finding a unique area to scale out a business is really tough. I write about that in Make Elephants Fly, my book on innovation, and I can give you some tips on that.
Excellent.
Yeah. I was talking to someone about this topic recently, and it's like we basically agreed on a Venn diagram of where's your passion, where can you do something that's unique, what can you charge money for, and what's the market size, because you need to be able to scale. And I guess that's the key is understanding kind of where there's that audience behind it. But like you say, don't just, I know today I'm going to go and compete with Salesforce. That makes no sense. It's like you've got to have that niche and that angle that's different and smart behind what you're doing.
Absolutely. And what it is when you start to think about this, and it's a real challenge for a lot of people to move from a service company to a product company, very different mentality, very different approach. A lot of people get stuck here. And first of all, what a lot of what they try to do is they try to think of some big idea, right? Some huge idea. How can I change the world? If I'm going to be YouTube, should I,
Yeah.
should I come up with the idea, the first
I
one
should
to
be
come up with?
Amazon. I'll be
Yeah,
Amazon.
the biggest broadcast network in the world on video, the biggest
Exactly.
retail. These big ideas sound great, but they're almost impossible to execute on. And a lot
Yes.
of people waste a lot of time doing that. One way that a lot of innovations happen that people don't realize is thinking small.
Right.
Thinking small. So zeroing in on specific things that you notice in the process of helping your clients or customers that they have a lot of trouble doing, that are real pain points, that they're just doing the old way. Like they're getting it done somehow, but it's very inefficient. These are ripe for automation. Now, let me give you an example. A lot of people don't know this, but the founders of YouTube, when they started, they did not think of the big idea. They did not think, we're going to build the largest video broadcast network in the world. We're going to, change how the internet works and people consume content.
Yeah.
They did not think that. You know what they were thinking? We're going
No
to
idea.
start, we're going to start a video dating site. Video dating, and sounds great, like all ideas, like
Yeah.
they sound great, but they were the early days of the internet. And what they discovered very quickly is people don't want to date by video. They do not want to meet a stranger that they've never talked to on video and try to, get them
Yeah.
to go out on a date. It's very awkward. And you can imagine even more awkward in the early days of the internet. So their site, their startup, like so many others, was failing. They were failing. They were not going anywhere. They,
That's really interesting.
yeah,
Because Facebook was started by Mark Zuckerberg on one campus because he wanted to meet girls,
right.
and
Yeah.
then it
These,
expanded into a network across multiple campuses and universities, and then they've got a product. But you're right; it's like, how do you start small, solve that specific problem, and learn as you go along? It's that iteration, I guess, of
yeah. So
finding what's valuable.
finding what's iteration, and this is a key. So the founders of YouTube, they actually, their site was failing. People weren't engaging. They didn't want it, and they didn't know what to do. But they were hanging out, and had a party. They made a video, and then they wanted to share this video with their friends. And they were like, "How do we get it to them?" It's the early
Yeah.
days of the internet. There was no cloud that you could just
No.
upload it to. There was no Google Drive. These things didn't exist. So they said, "Oh, we spent all this time building this video dating site, which is sort of dying. We could upload it to our servers and just share the link." So they shared the link to all their friends, and all their friends were like, "Wow, that's amazing. I watched the video on your site. Hey, can I have a video? Can I share that?" This
Yeah.
single insight, it's a pain point, right?
Yeah.
They discovered, and it was totally unrelated even to their core business, but they
Yep.
discovered a pain point that all these people had. And they're like, "Oh, we should just rename this." And they came up with the name YouTube and put it out there so people can share video. So it wasn't the big idea of a broadcast network. It was a simple way for people to share videos. And then as more and more videos were uploaded to YouTube, suddenly by default, it became a broadcast network.
So,
And
Steve, this is really interesting. So, just something in my head to see if this makes any sense. I've got this thing about DIY, done with you, done for you. in the service world. DIY online courses, done with you coaching, done for you a service. What you described for YouTube in that moment was they created a done for you service, which is if you put your video into this online platform, you can share it with whoever you like. It was a service that was done for other people. But it was a
Yes.
product.
Yes.
No people touching it. You could upload it and share it.
Yes.
It's a true I've always thought done for you services. That's where the money is, where you solve a problem for someone. It's productized. It's online. You don't need to talk to a human being and you pay some money for it.
That's absolutely right. See, these are scalable business. I'll give you one more example. There's another company we all know. The founder he had raised a lot of money. It was his second startup. He had sold his first startup, but he was struggling. He had made a game. He was passionate about games. He had made this game, and all these users were coming into his game, and they were trying it out, and they were leaving. They didn't, even though he'd spent this huge amount of money. What he noticed was, oh my God, my company's failing. I am failing. And he started to look around like, this isn't working. The little thing he noticed was not what his customers were doing, but what his engineering team had done. So his engineering team, in making this game, they had also hacked together a way to communicate between each other with messaging, instant messages. So they were collaborating through instant messaging. Do you know what company this is?
Slack, by any chance?
It is Slack. Exactly. That is how Slack started. The list goes on and on and on.
Wow.
You look at these companies.
That was a guess, Steve. I had no idea.
Yeah,
I was
you had
thinking
no
WhatsApp,
idea.
but yeah.
But the companies, Yelp, the reviews were an afterthought. They only saw afterwards that the reviews were good. Groupon, that we all know, that was a site for doing social good. Yet people got on that site and they started doing something totally different, trying to find bargains for each other.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you do. Twitter was a podcasting site. Whatever you're doing, look for something that you got to look for something. It might be tangential to what you're doing, where you discover it, but these ideas are out there everywhere that transform business.
I think the real lesson here is just start, because there's so many entrepreneurs I see that it's like, how are you getting on with your new products? And so, well, 3 years later, it's like, oh, we're almost ready for launch. Like, give it a few more months. And it feels like everyone's trying to make this 100% perfect plan. And if it takes you 3 years to execute that plan, you've lost 3 years worth of learning, and it might not be the right plan in the first place. Whereas actually, if you start small, iterate. I think listening to your customers is so underrated. It sounds obvious, but there's a lot of people that I think I've definitely seen this go wrong in software. They think they've nailed a problem, and then they put all of their effort into a software solution to fix that problem, and then they launch it, and then they realize that no one has that problem. Whereas actually, I think, yeah, just starting small, listen to your customers, get that feedback, iterate, improve, and get it out there. All these examples you've given, that what they've become is not how they started. And you couldn't write a business plan day one to say, in 10
No.
years' time, YouTube is going to be acquired by Google, et cetera, et cetera. But people are going to watch it on their TV more than they do Sky or anything else as a subscription. It's like that doesn't come in the early stages. And if it does, you're probably a bit of a dreamer, which is great if you can see that vision in
Right.
advance. But as you've proven, it's rare. It doesn't come at day one.
Starting small is absolutely right. And if you look at these ideas, Twitter, that could be coded in a week. The first version they put up there was super simple. Yeah,
Right.
YouTube was literally sharing a link to something they had already built. All these people don't usually have the big idea when they start. Even Google, which we all think of, it's one of the most profitable companies that ever existed. When it was founded by Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they thought it was a nonprofit. They thought they were like, Google's a nonprofit. That's because what they were doing is they were grad students. They're building a search engine, a little search engine to find academic research papers online.
They had no idea how to monetize it. That came later.
They had no idea what even the potential was. It was only later they stumbled on a general search engine. And even then, at the early days, they didn't believe in it. They didn't see it. They're smart guys. You can't get much smarter, but they didn't see the potential. They offered to sell Google for $750,000 to Excite.com.
Wow.
Excite at Home was this big cable company that no longer exists, that was doing set
Yeah.
top boxes. They no longer exist. They tried to sell it. Excite at Home said, no,
Wow.
750,000. We don't want Google. Like
Oh my God.
you can imagine those executives today, like they're passing up a big deal. But
Yeah.
we all these things are not obvious. There's a very interesting story about innovation. Paul Allen, super smart guy,
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
of the founders of Microsoft.
Yep.
He decided, well, I have tons of money. Microsoft has gone through the roof. I have more money than I know what to do with. Decided, I'm going to start a company that's an innovation machine. And literally, like and this was the early days before Google, before any of these others. And he was like, if one of the things we incubate in
Yeah.
my incubator becomes, the next Microsoft, because there no Google existed at that time, no Amazon, then, pays for all the losers. And we're going to do a ton of ideas. So he got together the most talented people you can imagine, like literally like the top music, all these creative people, the top music composers, the top engineers, top graphic interface, user experience designers, all these, super brains, and hired them. He's like, money's
So
no
you can afford to. Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
money's not an object. We can just come in here. We're gonna produce a company that produces billions of dollars in value. And then the management team set out to do that. So what they were doing is they had this filter. They're like, if it's not a big idea, we won't do it. Like, so they went through all these ideas with all these like truly talented, amazing, top of the line people, and going through idea after idea. And they weeded out all the small ideas. They only kept the big ideas. And they ended up funding 14 different projects in their lifetime, something like that. None of them were a hit.
Wow.
You know why? Because it's the little ideas that
Yeah.
unfortunately lead to, it's not obvious. The ideas you think are big things are often wrong. Like you're missing a piece. They don't work. Something isn't there. And by killing all the innovation at the little stage, when people were just playing around, trying different things,
Yeah.
looking at different things, they killed their potential. And that company went away.
So
So
Steve,
true.
I've written something down, which again, this is why I love doing these podcasts, Steve, with Kevin and with people like you, because you make me think of things I'd forgotten. So years ago, I read a book by Bandler and Grindler on NLP, and they talk about, I think it was about 20 years ago, if I got the book right. They talk about the human mind has filters. So when you're talking to someone, you're filtering out everything else, the periphery, and you're focused on a question in your mind or something that you want to hear. You've got confirmation bias. You're waiting for the signal. When you see the signal, then you say, "Oh, I'm right," and then you play it. And I've written down, you've got to take off the blinkers and look around you. So what you're saying is the problem with the big idea filter is exactly that. All the little ideas get filtered out because you're only looking for the next Uber, the next Amazon, the next Netflix. Whereas actually, if you've got some idea and some interesting people around you and you play in the sandpit for a while and keep the blinkers off, you might find all sorts of interesting things. Is
Oh, yeah.
that where we're going?
That's where we're going. You have to keep a totally open mind. You have to look at what's around you, what people are doing around you, primarily where they're struggling, where there's some value you can add, and then go from there, connect the points, right? Say, oh, that's something we could actually make so much easier for these people.
Yeah.
That's what you do as a service provider anyway. Your job is to make life easier for people. You're providing service, right? You're doing something that is really hard for them. So in the real world, this is how you innovate. This is how people innovate. And you were mentioning companies like Netflix. Netflix didn't start out with, what they are today, this
No,
online provider of all, videos and producing all their own content. They
it
just
was a
started out
DVD company, wasn't it?
mailing
Mailing
DVDs.
DVDs. I used to
Very
get them.
simple idea. Like,
Yeah.
okay, don't bother going to the store. We'll just
That's
mail
right.
you a DVD. And they became
They almost died. They came really close to just collapsing.
most companies do. most companies do. And Uber, another one you just mentioned, they were a black car service, for very
Right.
expensive rides. And then they figured it out along the way what actually worked. Another thing that I want to tell you is how companies, the type of what you need to do once you kind of get that idea. So I always tell people, I said productize, which is the first step. What's the next step after productizing? So products are great, but products aren't enough in today's world. If you really want to become a dominant player and you really want to maintain your, your hegemony over your market, you need to become an ecosystem. So I always tell people, don't think of products. Once you build your product, think of platforms. Build platforms, not products. Now, what's the difference? A product does one thing really well for a customer. But what a platform does is suddenly open up your product to not just you providing value to your customer, but creating a way where multiple parties, by participating, can create even more value.
Exactly.
So let's look. Let's look at one of the classic ones, Salesforce. You mentioned them earlier, salesforce.com. Like Mark Benioff, brilliant guy. When he started Salesforce, it was such a new radical idea that he couldn't even raise venture capital. We all
Right.
think, he's an incredible salesperson, by the way, in the first place. Like he could sell. He only got money, angel money from his ex-boss, like his previous boss, which was Larry Ellison. So he got a
Or
little
was
angel
it?
Yep. He got a little angel money from Larry Ellison and a few other people and launched Salesforce. When he launched it, it was a product, right? CRM, like the beginnings of
Yep.
CRM. But why is Salesforce still dominant? Because if you go into the marketplace today,
It's a marketplace. Exactly.
I was saying, if you go into the marketplace of products, CRM products, you will see that Salesforce is no longer the cheapest. It's no longer the best user interface. It's big, it's bloated, it's clunky. You could go out and get dozens of other CRM solutions that perform better than
Yeah.
Salesforce. But what did Salesforce do that was so strategic that it allows nobody to really compete with them? They created what you just said, a marketplace within Salesforce.
Exactly.
Instead of just providing all the value themselves,
Yep.
they said, we can't think of every possible way to make this better. We're going to open it up to third-party developers.
Yeah.
And they did this very early because they had first mover advantage. Third-party developers could come in and they can create add-ons to Salesforce and they can access our customers. What will this do? This will provide more value to our customers and more value to our platform, not a product, because now it's a platform. It's a bunch of products that are working in an ecosystem that Salesforce owns. This brilliance, this early move that they did means today it's very hard to compete with them because you can come out with a leaner, better, faster CRM product, but it will never match what the ecosystem Salesforce has. And their
That's
current
really interesting.
customers, they don't want to leave. Because they're not just using Salesforce as CRM, they're using all
Yep.
these other add-ons.
It's clever.
Any new player comes into the field, they can't attract these third-party developers because why would they go to them? They don't have enough customers to make it
They
worth their
almost
time.
can't leave because it's so much in terms
Exactly.
of that kind of time you'd have to take in the switching costs that it's not worth it. And like thinking about that example in other spaces, WordPress is a good example. It's open source and kind of like open to plugins and everything else that goes with it. That means that people will use WordPress and it will continually innovate and improve. Xero in the accounting software space, I
Yeah.
think most people I know use Xero now rather than one of the more well-known competitors from maybe
Exactly.
10, 15, 20 years ago. And I think that's a large part as well, as they embrace the add-ons that you can have as parts of that, as opposed to wanting to be a closed shop where they do everything themselves. So yeah, I
It's
think
you
that's
look
really
across
interesting.
at all these industries, whether it's Apple, they have third-party developers, whether it's Microsoft, Microsoft isn't making all the software for Windows, never had. Everyone, Amazon, they brought in other stores to compete with their own products
Yeah.
that they're selling there. You take this, you get this network effect, and the network effect, this marketplace network effect, creates a pseudo monopoly. So when you get to a certain level, once you have your product that hits and you get your custom, you immediately need to switch into now we're becoming a platform. How do
So
we develop this? And once you do that, you're a gold mine. Like if you can make that transition from product to platform, suddenly you have the potential to become one of these enormous companies in your space.
Steve, so we could talk, I think, for I don't know, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, easily.
Absolutely.
So we need to draw this to a close. But this is nothing like what I expected, which is brilliant because the stuff I just hadn't thought of. So
I'd honestly
Kevin,
say if you have time, I'd happily extend to go through depending on your availability. But it is really interesting. I think from a listener perspective, if there's, yeah, kind of, again, like, it feels like we've just scratched the surface in terms of how far this goes.
Well, in
But
6
yeah.
months, we can do another interview, and we'll
Yeah,
pick another
exactly.
topic, and we'll go
maybe
for it.
that's the way to do it. But yeah, there's a hell of a lot of information just here that makes you think about the business model behind what you're doing that I think is really insightful.
Thank you.
So let me feed back a few things that I think our audience may have picked up on. And let's see if I've got the right point, Steve. And then if you add, and then Kevin, if you could just like jot something as well. I've written down standardization is in a service is about efficiency. It's not productization. Productization is around automation. That's one of the keys. Thinking small, solve a real pain point that's very niche, and keeping the blinkers off. Because I mean, I really hadn't engaged with that, but you're absolutely spot on. And then the pièce de résistance, create an ecosystem or a platform, turn a product into a platform, and all of a sudden you become almost undefeatable.
Mhm.
Did I miss anything?
You got it. That's what we covered.
Kevin, anything that I've missed, you think, from your point of
There's
view?
a couple of things it triggered for me. I don't think there's anything you missed, but the things it triggered on my side would be the big companies, and obviously there's exceptions to every rule, but generally their innovation does dry up as they get bigger. And the way they grow is quite often through acquisition or obviously the core product. But um, it reminded me of when you mentioned Google. I also know someone that turned down the chance to buy Google in the early stages. They also turned down LinkedIn. And one thing they said to me afterwards was, yeah, we could have bought LinkedIn, but if we'd have bought LinkedIn, we'd have destroyed it. It wouldn't have even become LinkedIn. And I think that's because of that example you're giving. They need to have that right environment to thrive. And there's a story in, I don't know if I've read the book, Black Box Thinking by Matthew Said, and he gives the story, I think I mentioned this to Mike recently, but how there was two sets of students that were given a task to create the best pots out of pottery. And um, Group A were tasked with create the best, Group B were tasked with create the most. And what they found from this study, I thought was really interesting, is that Group B, that was tasked with make the most, they made the most, but in terms of quality, Group B also won because they tested, they learned, they experimented, they iterated, and that's where the quality comes from. You just try something and then you learn, as opposed to let's think about this forever and eventually try and
Yeah,
see
you
what works
can't
on that.
sit in a bubble and think. That
No.
hardly any good idea. The good ideas are in the real world. They're out there.
Exactly.
You have to get out of your bubble and actually go into the world and find out where people are banging their heads against the wall, where they're tripping, where things are
Yeah,
happening, they're struggling, and that's where the great innovations and breakthroughs come.
Steve,
exactly.
that's brilliant. So, Steve, where can people find you and find out more about you?
I'm super easy to find. You can find me at Founderspace. So go to founderspace.com and you can contact me there. I have tons of videos, tons of content. You can, go on there. Mike, you've been on my podcast.
I have.
So you can listen to Mike. It's a brilliant episode. I give it out to everybody.
Thank you.
You can find my books, Make Elephants Fly, Surviving a Startup, and The 5 Forces. I have 3 different books. They're all on the site. You can also find me on LinkedIn. So anybody can contact me on LinkedIn. Just search for Founders Space Steve Hoffman and I'll come up.
Perfect. All it remains, Steve, Captain Hoff, our great friend, is to say thank you. Really, really thank you. That was amazing. As always, I've learned a ton of stuff, that some of which I'd forgotten, some of which I never knew. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you,
That's
Mike and
brilliant.
Kevin. It's great to
Thanks
be
very much,
yours.
Steve.
Thanks, Steve.